Bunny Girl's second arc has just concluded, and what a way to finish off its second arc. This show started extremely strong with its first arc, setting up the characters and conceit of the show, and continues on that high with the inclusion of Tomoe Koga, who very much has an interesting adolescent syndrome attached to her that just so happens to also remind me of a certain character that also came in the second arc of a certain show. Yeah, it's Monogatari again. Look, the ability to contrast the two is just so interesting, and I can't help but draw parallels and put the two shows in contention again for good fun. This week, the main topic or the main conceit of Bunny Girl's second arc that I want to look at revolves around regret and how our characters deal with it or can't deal with it. Let's begin, as we do with Monogatari. Regret recurs many times throughout the series, especially I think near the end with Owari Monogatari and a little bit in Monogatari's second season. But we do see a central focus of regret right from the second arc of Bakemonogatari, the first season, as well, pertaining to Mayoi Hachikuji. For Mayoi, her regret stems from being unable to remember her mother. For her, it was a very visceral regret, and the guilt she found when she couldn't even remember her mom's face made her act. Of course, that regret isn't her fault, and as a child, having to deal with being separated in that way, she can't really be blamed for having this huge dissonance with her mom. But nonetheless, Mayoi does regret that she can't remember her mother. Even if it's not her fault, it's still something she regrets. And she wants to fix that. So she does, or at least she tries. In the end, Mayoi is never able to finish her regret, since she's dead, and her mother's house is gone, and her mom's gone, and who knows where she is now. However, with the help of Araragi, she does arrive and find the remnants of where her mom used to be, and kind of has this moment of nirvana. In one way, she is able to solve her regret by arriving at her destination, but really, on another very morbid hand, she doesn't really solve anything, but she's still content with at least having arrived and tried. That to me is the very striking feature of her arc. In the end, she isn't technically able to do what she wants to do. She's only able to move on from her regrets by accepting it herself, despite, again, not really having did what she wanted to do. But she doesn't have any other choice. Mayoi's been dead for 10 some odd years, and who knows again where her mom is and how she'll even find her. She can't turn back the clock now, so she has to accept what she's given. Bunny Girl takes that regret and spins it in its own way. With Koga's extremely overpowered adolescent syndrome, she can bend time itself, and her arc revolves around just that. She can replay strings of her life for what seems to be as long as she wants, basically being able to load from a previous save point, as if her life was just some visual novel. And this works really well, even dragging Sakuda in the mess, and he slowly becomes Koga's regret. But before all of that development, I would argue that Koga probably doesn't have a regret to solve. She's able to look into the future, or essentially parallel worlds, and she can live through any choice she wants to live through. That's why her avoiding the confession is repeated so many times. She doesn't want that to become a regret. She doesn't want to break the status quo of the life she's made in the city, so she'll find another way. She has choice. She has volition over her regret, something that Mayoi doesn't really have. This is where the main obvious parallel I draw comes from. It's this idea of cycles. Mayoi is a lost cow, an aberration literally to distort direction, to make one become lost, and by association is lost. For Araragi, that means being stuck in this loop of misdirection, and she continuously lives in her own loop of misdirection, thinking that she can still reach her mother despite, not realizing that it's 10 years later. She can't do anything, unable to find the solution of her regret, and all she can do is just wait until Araragi finds her. This is a very passive problem for Mayoi. Koga, very similarly, is in a cycle of her own, albeit this time very much more obvious because she's looping time and in a way is trying to find her direction from multiple paths of misdirection where regret would be. Of course, that's all changed when Sakura comes into picture. She is very active in the way she deals with her regret. But I think my favorite aspect of all of this is that, like Mayoi, Koga really doesn't solve anything either. Despite being so active, her resetting time doesn't mean much when she and Sakura can remember everything. Koga has to keep her regret with her, just like Mayoi, who, again, hasn't really seen her mother and doesn't really have that affirmation with her family. But they both move on anyway. And that's the really interesting part of both of their arcs. They converge in the end on hope and a happiness that both of them inevitably find despite what the truth of the matter really is. For Mayoi, she can smile and keep on going as a wandering ghost with Araragi's company every so often, so that, she's not just bored out of her mind all day. And she can continue being a ghost knowing at least she tried and, she had arrived at where her memories were, and even though they're altered and changed without, her being able to do anything, she's still happy. Koga as well, despite turning back the clock and resetting everything, hasn't really run away from the problem. Instead, she steers forward with a new route, one that she won't manipulate any further, and she's fine with that. By resetting and going back to the aforementioned save point, all of the time and events that transpired didn't technically happen, and Sakura doesn't have to play a facade for her anymore. Even if it remains only in their memories, they don't have to act as if it did, and they can move forward despite what they went through. She accepts her friendship with Sakura. She accepts her regret of having fallen in love with him in the first place. Despite the problems both instances of regret had incurred, the end result is one of happiness, of acceptance. I really like that kind of optimistic wrap in both arcs. They dealt with regret in such drastically different ways, with one being able to manipulate the situation such that regret can never foster while one is strung along, unaware that their regret cannot be resolved. But both ultimately end on a single note, that you have to accept your regret. If you painstakingly try to fight against it, try to fix something that's already been done, try to mitigate the damage done to yourself, you'll just end up delaying and prolonging something that hurts, like Koga did. Or if you avoid it altogether, it only ends up eating at you, and you'll be stuck in a prison, unable to find your way, like Mayoi. Two different kinds of cycles and loops, and ways of dealing with it that are both solved by acceptance. Even more so, as a bonus fact, both shows also use this regret arc to help the main duo develop an even greater bond, with Araragi and Senjogohara becoming an official couple through Araragi's struggle in solving Mayoi's regret, and of course reaffirming Sakura's undying love for Mai as he's wrapped up in all of this Koga business. In a way, this acceptance of regret from Mayoi and Koga is also mirrored in that relationship, strengthening the main duo, and that's just a really cool parallel to draw as well. By and all, the inclusion of the second arc builds upon the first gracefully while exploring a topic that by all means is heavy and yet manages to find that warmth and light, ending the second arc with ebullience.